Good people of the Grove, we are in Exodus chapter 39 and chapter 40. We're finishing out Exodus today, though you may have two more meetings left in your growth groups for the year. I'm going to go ahead and shoot a video that covers 39 and 40 because I think if the holiday season gets a hold of us as it normally does, you maybe only be able to get one meeting in the next month. So I'm going to go ahead and shoot one video for everybody and for both chapters, and I hope that it will be a good little red bow on the top of the gift of the book of Exodus. You have endured repetition. You have endured seemingly very distant passages, only to find that they are yet very near and very applicable to today's world. And so I just want to applaud everyone that has gone through Exodus this year and continued to push through the uncomfortable, the monotonous, the difficult, and also the life-giving at the end of all of that. So good job, everybody that has gone through Exodus. So proud of y'all, and can't wait to see what 2024 holds for us. We're going to go through the books of 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and so that will kick off in early January. But for now, let's finish Exodus 39 and 40. So here's what I want to do. I just have like one summary statement of chapter 39, and then I'll dig in. What does this say about God? What does this reveal about us? And then what must we do about it out of chapter 40? Here's my summary statement out of chapter 39. It really comes the last couple of verses of that chapter. And I really think it's a good summary for the Christian life. And that is basically this. As you know, it says this: according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses, so the people of Israel had done all the work. I think that's a really beautiful statement of the Christian life. Like, we all are hearing God's voice to someone else. And yet we are not let off the hook because God didn't tell us directly. Instead, he told the writers of the scriptures, and we read the Bible, and now we're called to do the same things that the people that read and that wrote the Bible. And so in many ways, that statement is a good summary statement for the Christian life. We are called to hear the words of someone else that heard the direct words from God and then do all that he's commanded them and therefore us to do. Why would we do that? Well, in the letter to the Thessalonians, it's 1 Thessalonians, I believe, where Paul says, you have accepted the words, these words, our words to you, not just as words from man, but as words from God himself. And that indeed is what we're called to do as Christians. And so it's not just that we rely on God's word, written word, but we do rely on our personal relationship with the Lord. And I don't mean individualistic relationships. I mean, you have a relationship with him that's very personal. And we are called to listen and to pray and to do. And that's what really growth groups and the Christian life comes down to. So I think that's a really cool summary statement that we can take from that particular passage. And then we can get into chapter 40 and go, okay, what is this chapter? What are these chapters? And I think it's a great summary chapter for all of Exodus because God has finally dwelling with his people. He has been wanting to dwell with his people all this time. He's pulled them out of an idolatrous nation. He's brought them through into the wilderness. He has saved them from the Egyptians. He's rescued them from the false gods of Egypt and the perils of the Red Sea. I mean, he has done amazing things for them, and he has yet to meet with them. And now the culmination of that longing finds its climax right here in Exodus chapter 40. God wants to be with his people, and he is moving heaven and earth to make it happen. That is a beautiful revelation of our God's heart. Second, God's presence is, if you'll notice at the end of chapter 40, God's presence is starting to be described as glory, as filling, and as holy. It's separate. You can't go near it. It's glorified. It's full of his glory. In other words, he's so magnificent in his presence that you can't even look upon it. It'll burn your eyes out in a way. And yet, at the same time, he's trying to be as close as he can with a congregation of sinners in the Old Testament that came through the erection of the tabernacle. And for us, it comes in the incarnation of Jesus himself and the presence of his Spirit. So it's glory, it's filling, it's yet though holy. And then third, what does it reveal about God? I think God's presence is available to all, Everyone was able to see it. It says it right there in the end of chapter 30, I'm sorry, and the end of chapter 40. The cloud of the Lord was on the tabernacle by day, and fire was in it by night, and in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys. It was consistent, it was persistent, and everyone had availability to see and be reminded that their God dwelled amongst them. So though he was holy, though it was frightening, and though it was magnificent, it was also a beautiful reminder of comfort and of presence. And I think that's really comforting for all of us, that in a world that is dark and shaken and war-ridden, our God remains with us in the presence of his Spirit in this new temple of our bodies, bearing witness to us that we are his children, just as the tabernacle in the presence of God did way back in Exodus. All right, well, what does this passage reveal about us? And I think first, we need blessing. We need blessing, and we need to bless others. That's what the whole Abrahamic blessing was all about. Like, God's going to bless you, and you should be a blessing to others. And Moses knew that, and Moses personified it. At the end of chapter 39, he says, "And Moses saw all the work, and behold, they had done it. As the Lord had commanded, so had they done it. And then Moses blessed them." Man, I'm not Moses, but I could just stand in the place of a congregational leader and bless you for all the work that you do to make sure that God's presence is available to the people. For all of you who set up and tear down, who hold babies, who clean up atrocities on Sundays and in your homes, who watch your sheetrock get busted and beaten, who has seen pieces of furniture clawed up and scuffed up, who has seen and experienced rejection and dejection and emotional difficulty because God's people aren't always kind. For all of you who have put the work in, let me stand in the place of a Moses and say, "Man, the Lord bless you for your efforts. He serves you and he honors you for serving him." And I just want to remind you of that he sees and he knows and he smiles at your efforts. Though they may not be perfect, they are in honor and in glory of God. And I just want to reiterate that to you today. All right, that's number one. We need blessing. Number two, the end of Exodus chapter 40 reminds me of Hebrews 10:31, where he talks about coming together as a congregation. And he talks about warning one another of sin and making sure that we're not given to bitterness. Because he says, if you go on sinning, it's not going to be good for you. And then he says in verse 31, "It is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of a living God." Do we believe that about our God? That yes, he's forgiving and loving and beautiful and gracious and merciful and slow to anger. And yet, if we persist in sin, if we continue to rebel against him, it is a dreadful thing to fall into the hands of a living God. When we come too close, we presume upon his grace and just assume he'll forgive us. It's a dreadful thing. But when we fall upon him, repentant and humbled, oh, is he gracious and merciful in those times. So that reminds me of that. I think that it calls us then to have respect and fear and reverence for God. For when God dwells amongst his people, we are reminded of just how how beautiful and how magnificent he is. And then finally, it reveals, this passage in 39 actually, reveals for us, we've got work to do. If you'll notice, verse 1, verse 5, verse 7, verse 21, verse 26, verse 29, and verse 31, all of chapter 39 talk about people getting to work. We have work to do, y'all. And it reminds me, well, I'll get to the point where it says, what must we do? But it reminds me that we really do have good, significant, beautiful work. Even though it may feel mundane and normal, it is God honoring and glorifying to him if we will see it as such. And then finally, what does this reveal about us? Oh, that's it. That was the last one. Okay, sorry. I almost added a bonus. We need to follow instructions, right? God has given us instructions and we've got work to do. All right, so let's finish this within the next minute or so. What must we do as a result? Well, first, we need to finish our work, right? Exodus chapter 40, verse 33 says, "And he erected the court around the tabernacle and the altar and set up the screen of the gate of the court. And so Moses finished the work." It reminds me of 2 Timothy 4:5, where Paul writes to young Timothy, "Fulfill your ministry." We've all been given work and ministry to do on the earth, It is time for us to fulfill it, to get to work, to put our hands to the plow, and not just sit back and enjoy the riches of God's blessings, but to make sure that whatever God has given us, we then give it to others through hard work, through determination, and by a grace-filled determination unto the Lord. All right, that's number one. What must we do? Number two, pretty easy. Follow God with everything that you do and all that you are and in all that God has called you to do. You look at the end of chapter 40, verses 36 through 40, and you see that God's people followed God no matter what. When he struck up the tabernacle in the middle of the night, it doesn't matter if your baby just went to sleep or not, we're heading out. Whatever God calls us to do, however he makes his path completely impossible to ignore, we must be a people who follow. I hope that this has been a fruitful journey for you in Exodus. I can't wait for 1st and 2nd Corinthians in 2024. God bless you. What an awesome job you've done. Can't wait to see how God continues to produce fruit in you now that you've got Exodus under your belt.